Okay, so we're entering the final 10, 11 days of the month, and it isn't looking too pretty if you're looking for heat across the bulk of Europe. In fact, believe it or not, it looks as if over half of the continent will end the month of July on a rather chilly note indeed, and the UK and Ireland will wind up below average for July 2023. Who would have thought, right? Thanks for clicking on to the Thursday edition of Vogan's European Outlook, the second last weekday video here on the channel. Of course, I always take Saturday off, and I will resume on Sunday with the big global weather and climate report. Isn't that going to be an interesting video, considering all the excitement in recent days and weeks with regards to the old climate change and whatnot here? So we will talk a little bit more about climate on Sunday. And in tomorrow's video, stay tuned, we will look a little bit about winter, because I'm sure there's a few folk getting a little bit overheated with the TV. And if you live in the Mediterranean basin at the moment, you're probably a wee bit tired of the heat and looking towards some winter chat. So I will promise, as I did last week, to talk a little bit about winter in the Friday edition of the European Outlook. But this is upcoming 5 days of the GFS Ensemble, and it is a chilly looking chart if you're anywhere from most of Iberia, France, Low Countries, northern Germany, Poland, right the way up through Scandinavia, the British Isles, and indeed Ireland is in a rather below average situation for the upcoming 5 days. The 6 to 10 days, no better. In fact, it actually looks as if it maintains itself the area of above average, and where we can, it's been alluded to for some time now about heat wave conditions, primarily through the Mediterranean basin, not a continental heat wave by any stretch, but a Mediterranean based heat wave. It looks as if that is shrinking and getting shoved to the east as areas of low pressure and Atlantic air become a little bit more dominant across the majority of the continent here. So this is the 6 to 10. This takes out to the 30th of July. And the 11 to 15 will end with, and you can see here that it is, according to the GFS Ensemble anyway, no great shakes when it comes to heat. That's for sure to start the month of August. So, what's happening with regards to the jet stream? Of course, we've had this very wavy pattern. We've had a wave 5 pattern, as was alluded to in the Met Office deep dive back on Tuesday. We've got, of course, these stuck heat domes, one over Western North America, one over the Mediterranean basin, and one over parts of Far East Asia, where we've had record breaking heat in parts of East China, up into the Koreas, Japan. Like I've said before, western portions of China, northern portions of India has been below average. So China is a bit of a kind of east to west split with regards to the extreme temperatures, but no getting away from the fact that it's been persistently hot. We've also had persistent heat across the southwest desert region of the United States as well here. And it looks as if the temperature did reach 47 degrees Celsius in Sardinia, so right up there with some all-time records in a local situation anyway. I think 45 was achieved in the interior northeast of Spain as well. So yeah, it has been hot, and I'm sure there will be, unfortunately, casualties due to this heat wave when all is said and done here. But one thing I want to point out here is we've had fairly persistent high pressure over the west and north Atlantic, and that has been allowing the sea surface temperatures to really start to jack up in this region of the world. And we will look at sea surface temperatures in the global weather report on Sunday coming up, because I'm curious to have a look and see if those anomalies are still getting chipped away. We'll look at that actually tomorrow, because, of course, with regards to the winter situation, we'll look, if you're wanting favourable conditions for winter weather across Europe, across the UK and Ireland, there's several drivers that we'll look at, including the El Nino. Not all El Ninos provide warm winters, by the way. So we'll look at that in a little bit more detail tomorrow with regards to exactly where that warmest water in the equatorial Pacific will wind up. We're also looking at the sea surface temperatures over the North Atlantic as well, because that has influence potentially in the upper air pattern and specifically the NAO. So we'll look at that tomorrow. So stay tuned. If you haven't already done so, be sure to hit that big red button, subscribe to the channel. Lots of things here to look at with regards to the summer, the winter, global aspects, what extremes are taking place around the world, day by day, week by week. I certainly endeavour here on markloganweather.com on YouTube to show you the big picture and to show you essentially things that you're not seeing elsewhere. So that is certainly my goal, my target, my mission statement, so to speak, here on YouTube, to provide you with information that you're not seeing elsewhere. I don't claim to be an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I try to show you some of my knowledge that I do have based over 20, 30 years of studying weather and indeed even climate. I try to deliver that in the most relatively simple way possible, especially for folks that maybe don't know so much about weather and the finer details with regards to meteorology. I try to make it as straightforward and as easy to understand as possible. So the jet stream, very wavy, very meridional. So we've had this big dip over parts of eastern North America. We've had this rise in the ridge position over the North Atlantic and Greenland. And then, of course, we've had that big dip over the northeast of the Atlantic, extending across the UK, Ireland, and Scandinavia. The deepest negative anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere in the last 4 weeks has been planked right over the UK, which is rather interesting. What that's doing is it's trapping the heat dome across the Mediterranean basin. But I looked at the minimums and the maximums of meteocele, and you know what? It's pretty much average hot conditions across Central Europe. But the real true heat, if you will, is focused across the Mediterranean basin, and really out with the Mediterranean basin. It's hard to even kind of classify as a heat wave. So that's why I've kind of said that really, for all the media attention has been drawn to this heat wave over southern Europe, it really is primarily based through the mid basin. And what we are going to see is, it looks as if, according to the GFS anyway, what we are going to see is a strengthening of the jet stream, an unseasonable strengthening of the jet stream to end the month of July. And it looks as if this is certainly going to keep things very much unsettled, cooler than average, wetter than average, and possibly throw us a few relatively deep areas of low pressure our way. So you notice here at the moment, as of Thursday, the 20th of July, we've got this rather straight line jet crossing over North America. Then, of course, it bumps against that area of high pressure over the North Atlantic, so it forces the jet to push all the way up towards Greenland here. Then we've got this big dip, this trough to the west of the UK and Ireland, and that is the incubation region. That is the area of cyclogenesis, where we see the energy riding across the top of that jet out of Greenland. Of course, it's drawn cool air off Greenland, coming south, meeting that warm air over the Azores, over Iberia, and it's forcing the development of new areas of low pressure. And that is exactly what we're seeing. And we are going to see another spell of unseasonably cool, wet conditions this upcoming weekend across the UK and indeed Ireland. Looks as if parts of southern Ireland, the bulk of England and Wales, will see the wettest and windiest conditions. Further north, where the centre of low pressure is over Scotland, a little bit less in the way of wind and possibly a little bit less in the way of rainfall also. But you notice here, as we skip through the course of the time, this is of course the jet stream winds of tropicaltidbits.com, and you can see here the wavy action of this jet continuing through the weekend. There's the development of that new area of low pressure edging in across Ireland and the British Isles here. But all the while, we're starting to see the strengthening of the jet stream over the eastern North Atlantic here. And essentially this reinforces the pattern through the remainder of this month. What's going on over eastern North America, what's going on even in the western portion of North America. Plus, we also have a typhoon, it looks like, heading north up the east side of Asia, western portion of the Pacific Ocean. And as we force tropical energy in the form of a typhoon northwards into the North Pacific, that then in turn has impact on the pattern downstream over North America, the Atlantic, and indeed Europe here. And if you notice here that as we play through the course of next week, the jet stream is starting to flatten and strengthen over the Atlantic Ocean here, much stronger than what would be considered normal for the end of July, beginning of August, that's for sure. And you can see here some fairly strong winds associated with that jet stream. Now, one thing I want to point out to you is you notice here that with that strengthening jet stream, we have got the potential for a little bit of a kind of northward shift or southward shift in that fairly flat zonal jet streak. And what may happen is if that jet stream lifts a little bit further north, we're in the warmer air. If it dips further south, we'll stay in cooler air, like we've done already so far. You notice here that it did flex. It's like a skipping rope. It did flick a little bit to the north during the early and middle portion of next week. Then it takes a dip towards the end of next week. This is a long way out. There will be a lot of fluctuation in the model runs and the output as we progress through the weekend and into early next week. But I'm just showing you the fact that the jet stream is to flatten, it is to strengthen, and then of course it's anyone's guess whether it flicks to the north or flicks to the south of the UK and Ireland through the course of mid to end of next week here. So just wanted to point that out to you because I thought it was quite interesting to show you. Let's have a look at the GFS off weathercharts.com. This is the overview chart. And you can see here that we've got that kind of slack northwesterly airflow at the moment. Of course, with daytime temperatures warming at the surface, will bubble up the atmosphere, will increase the shower activity. But generally speaking, it is a relatively quieter pattern at this moment in time. But things change as we press towards the end of the week here. You notice here we've got more energy riding south out of the North Atlantic here. And then, of course, as that energy drops into the base of the trough, bumps up against warmer air associated over Spain, Portugal. That warmer air is of course getting shifted further east over the Mediterranean. But what we see is the development of new low pressure here, and you can see it happening as I speak. We'll play through the loop during the course of Saturday into Sunday. That feature then drops south, the pressure lowers, we increase the wind and the rain across the UK during the course of Saturday and into Sunday. That drops south. Then we're seeing another spell of relatively quiet conditions, then followed by another area of low pressure that moves in off the Atlantic. And of course, we're keeping in mind the fact that the jet stream is now starting to strengthen over the Atlantic. We're starting to flatten the upper air pattern. And now you can see here that we've got low pressure extending more towards the North Atlantic and up towards Greenland. Rather than that area of high pressure over the North Atlantic, we're starting to see lower pressure, the flattening out of the pattern. So that changes the dynamics, folks. And I've said this for the last, best part of 2 weeks now, that we need to watch this space towards the very end of the month. We've got that shift in the Manchulian oscillation. We're seeing now a kind of subtle shift in the upper air pattern. We'll maintain unsettled conditions through the remainder of this month, but it's all eyes on the month of August here, and it looks as if we continue to see these areas of low pressure coming in from the west as opposed to the northwest. And the key to systems coming in from the west is we have the possibility of tapping some hotter, more humid conditions from the south into the early portion of August here, and I think that is a possibility as we go forward. We leave July, which has been cool and wet, and it looks as if it will remain that way into the month of August, where there's an increased chance of at least tapping something a little bit warmer and more humid, but also that increases the dynamics, the clash between cool and warm, and of course you increase the chance of stormy conditions as well here. So it's all to play for with regards to the end of the month and early portions of August. I'm about to run out of time, but you can see here the flatter look in the overall pattern in the upper air pattern over the northern hemisphere. Very, very significant storms, may I add, across the central and Balkan region of Europe. Check out this video here. This is the clash between mild Atlantic air and hot African stroke Mediterranean air. Flash floods, damaging winds, large hail, through Italy, Greece, Serbia, even parts of Slovakia, seeing damaging conditions here. And this is the ring of fire that we often talk about over North America, seen over Europe with the cool to the north and the warm to the south. Big clash zone in between. Run out of time. Please like, share, and